Hey, this is Rachel Cunningham, and you're listening to Joyful Love, episode 96. If you're ready to bring joy and connection back to your marriage, stick around. Each week, I give you the tools to up-level your thinking, open your heart, and bring joy and fun back to your relationship. Because it's not enough just to stay married. We want to love being married. Hello, friends. I got off of a call today where I was teaching a couple how to have better communication. And we were talking about just the difference between internal and external processors and how important it is to understand what kind of communicator your partner is. And so as I was thinking about the podcast that I wanted to put out this week, I was just thinking, you know what? I believe I recorded a podcast a couple years ago on the internal and external processors. So I went back, I dug deep in my archives and I found it. And so what I'm going to do this week and next week is I'm going to repost the replays of those podcast episodes that happened a couple years ago. So it's going to be a part 1 and a part 2 next week for the communication series. And so if you and your partner are having a hard time kind of connecting and you feel like you're constantly butting heads, this is the episode to start with this week. I know some of you have been following me since the very beginning, so maybe you listened to this 2 years ago when I first recorded it, but it's a great episode to re-engage. I know as I was listening to it again, I was like, oh yeah, that's such an important concept. You know, sometimes when I go back and listen to my own podcast, I'm like, oh yeah, I really need to start implementing some of those skills again in my own relationship. So if I can benefit from it and if my current clients can benefit from it, I figured you could benefit from it as well. So without further ado, enjoy an episode from 2 years ago that is still very relevant today. You know, most of my mornings are spent outside on my back porch, and it's been absolutely glorious. Another reason I'm feeling good is that for the past month, my husband and I have been working towards a decision on something really, really big. And we've been taking turns talking through all of the what ifs and expressing our doubts and concerns and all of our hopes and inspirations. And we've been bringing our thoughts and putting them in a blender together and mixing them. And then we'd take some breaks from discussing this big decision together so we could process it on our own. And let me be honest, it was me that asked for the break to process on my own because I'm an internal processor. And Chris is an external processor. So to make decisions about our lives, we have to respect each other's ways of processing. So then, you know, after I took my break, after I took this little break for me to process everything on my own and write in my journal and do what I needed to really think my thoughts on my own, we came back together and we picked up the discussion again. And one thing I've had the opportunity to learn on a deeper level over the past month is that making big decisions together can be really amazing growing opportunities. Those discussions that we have together are sacred moments. As a couple, when we're trying so hard to come together and make a decision, we can start to tell ourselves lots and lots of stories. And I noticed that as we were working through this, anytime Chris would have some doubt, my brain would interpret that as a reason to doubt myself. And I found so many opportunities these past several weeks to practice being present with our communication. So instead of bringing in all of our past circumstances or my past self-doubts, and instead of worrying about our future, to get through these discussions and to truly understand Chris and to truly understand myself and to blend our thoughts together to make this decision was the ultimate practice in being present in this moment. Not just by myself, but together. with an entire other human brain. Which brings me back to that sacred moment of making decisions together, right? Like that is such a beautiful gift to be able to come together with different brains and have patience and understanding for each other and communicating together to make those decisions. And I'm thankful to say that on this huge decision that we've been toying around with for honestly at least 6 months, possibly even more, I'm thankful to say that we have finally come to a decision that we feel very, very, very good about. But without the ability to stay present with each other and to fully hear each other's opinions, it could have led to a lot of arguing and hurt feelings. But I look back over the past month and I'm really proud of us for the intention and purpose that we put behind this decision and the freedom that we gave each other to express all of our doubts and concerns so that we could uncover what we needed to make a wise decision for ourselves. So this brings me to this week's topic. Today, we're going to talk about communication. There are several tools to communicate better. So this will be part 1. In part 1, we're going to talk about different styles and personalities. Now, there are many different personality tests. I'm sure you've all heard of them, and they can be incredibly helpful. But I like to keep it really simple. So today we're going to talk about the 2 main styles of communication and where you and your partner fit. The 2 styles are internal processors and external processors. When you understand which style you and your partner fit into, you'll understand your needs much better, and your communication with each other on the small stuff and the really big stuff will improve. So, internal thinkers process almost everything inside of their own head. They have their own private conversation. They go through all the what ifs and doubts and hopes and struggles all by themselves. And if they're given enough time, they'll work out all the details of how they feel before they speak. This process often makes them slow to respond. They tend to be quieter and need more time to make big decisions or even small decisions. External thinkers, on the other hand, talk through their thinking. They process details as they hear themselves say it out loud. But here's the thing. External processors might talk so quickly as they're thinking that they don't even end up agreeing with what comes out of their mouth. They're just processing out loud their internal thoughts to see how they feel on. It's like buying a pair of pants. They need to try them on to see how they fit. Most of you know yourself and your partner enough to understand which kind of thinker you are. Many times in relationships, it's stereotypical to have the male be the internal processor, while the female is the external processor. But this is not always the case, of course. In my relationship, I am definitely the internal processor, and my husband processes externally or verbally. It's important to know that there is no better way to process. Both the internal and external thinkers are beneficial in different ways for different people. Now, these different styles can be one of the opposites that attracts us, right? It can actually be very beneficial in a relationship. When a couple knows how to use these differences for their relationship, it can be a really beautiful match. But if a couple has no clue how to make this work for them, and if one or both assumes that their way of communicating is better, this difference can really hold a couple back from healthy communication. So when I coach my private clients, I know that they need help in understanding each other's communication styles when my client says things like, "He doesn't listen to me," or "I just need more space," or "He never wants to talk to me about his feelings," or "She doesn't respect my needs." I've personally said these same things in my own marriage at many times. I remember about a year ago, right around this time, when our high schooler was needing extra help in school, I started feeling very overwhelmed about helping him with homework. 7 subjects is a whole lot. And when you throw in the challenge of a kid who has a touch of ADHD, it can require a lot of hands-on help. So I was journaling about it and processing through all of the options. And I came to the conclusion that if Chris would take over making sure that the homework and the practice for the music classes were kept up on, I could manage the other help that our son needed. And I processed this all on my own, right? I came up with a schedule. I came up with exactly when and how I would help him and exactly what Chris would need to do to help him. I had it all figured out. So I told Chris, hey, I'm overwhelmed with homework and I need your help with taking over all the music classes. And he immediately started processing out loud. He told me how much he had going on right now and that he wasn't sure if he could fit one more thing in. And he told me how he was already stressed about all the things he was doing at that time with his business and the movie he was getting ready to shoot. You know what? He was right. He did have a lot going on. And he was processing all of that out loud to me. Now, the old me would have done one of 2 things. Number 1, I would have either backed away from conflict and said, never mind, you have too much going on, I'll take care of it, right? Because there was a time that I thought I had to protect everyone from their own feelings. So I didn't want Chris to feel stressed in this moment. So my brain wanted to tell me it's just easier to do it myself. Or the second thing I might have done is to take offense at his words, at him processing out loud all the things he had to do, because I would have told myself that he might just be trying to back out of parenting responsibilities. Before I understood how to watch my own brain and choose wisely the stories I tell myself, I would have ended up in tears and asking Chris, why can't you just understand that I need help too? We're both parents here. And we would have ended up in an argument. But I cannot emphasize enough how amazing it is to have the ability to watch my brain and catch it when it's a liar. I caught it in that moment. I said to myself, whoa, brain, that guy that you're married to has one of the biggest hearts that you've ever met. And he loves his kids every bit as much as you do. That is the truth. That is the true story here. So, with that said, what's really happening here? What's really happening with Chris processing his stress out loud? What's happening is that before I ever spoke with him, had an hour to process all my feelings and come to my decision in my journal and on my own. And this is the first time Chris is hearing about it. So he simply just needs time to process in his own way, which is verbally. So after catching my brain and redirecting it, I let him talk it out. I heard his points and his concerns. I didn't try to fix it for him. I didn't try to fix his emotions. I let him express what he needed to, right? And I didn't try to convince him of why he needed to help. I gave him space to figure that out in his own way. I listened and I agreed. And I said, I know you have a lot going on right now. And I heard him instead of arguing and blaming when I didn't need to. And you know what? After several minutes of him spilling out his own thoughts and processing in his own way, he ended up saying, without me prompting, but I know you have a lot going on too, and I want to help. He worked through it in about 10 minutes of verbal dialogue in a way that would work for him. But he needed that freedom to process what it would mean for him. And he needed to do it verbally out loud. He wasn't shirking responsibility. He was taking responsibility seriously enough to process it honestly. Now, this is important. he did have some stress about this responsibility. And his external stress did not mean anything about me, and it didn't mean anything about our relationship. It did not mean that he expected me to do it all. It did not mean that he didn't want to help our child. It didn't mean he was being selfish. It actually meant all the opposite. He wanted to help out. He saw that it was important. And his brain went to work verbally processing what it would mean for him and how to make it happen. All it meant was that he needed to process out loud all the feelings and thoughts he was having. And you know what? I didn't have to talk him into it. I didn't have to argue. I didn't have to get mad. All I had to do was hold space for him and let him process in the way that he needed to. He processed and then took the responsibility. Now, what if it was opposite? What if he was the internal processor? If he was the internal processor, and this is the first time I had spoken to him about this, he may get quiet for a while. He may need to think about it for a day or two and figure out how to make the extra responsibility that I was asking of him work for him. Now, in this situation, our temptation is that when someone gets quiet about something, our brains start telling us the story that they don't care. We create that story in our minds that since they don't want to talk about this, they don't care about us and they don't respect us. But if you're aware of your partner's unique mind and their desire to process things on their own, you can even preempt that by how you bring up the conversation. So in my case, if I were to have an internally processing husband, I might have said, "Hey, babe, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now by how long homework help is taking, and it would be really helpful if you took over these two subjects. Can you think about it for a day or two and see how you might be able to help with this?" And then I would say, "I'm going to check in with you tomorrow and see how you feel about it after you've had time to process it." You might say, "Let me know if we need to look at our schedule together to figure this out." And then you step back and you give them space to check back in when you said you would. Understanding both you and your partner's communication styles will help you know what to expect, and you can plan your conversations accordingly. We humans usually cannot simply adopt someone else's ideas and thoughts without processing what it means for ourselves first. So make sure that you take a few minutes today and try to figure out how you process as well. Knowing yourself will help you to be able to communicate to your partner your own needs. If you're an external processor, you might say, "Hey, babe, I need to process this out loud. Can you just listen while I do so? I'm not asking you to fix anything for me, so don't feel pressured to come up with an answer. I just need someone to process with." Start practicing letting your partner in on how you operate. It helps to build understanding and trust. So if you're an internal processor and they ask you about something that requires a big decision or even a small decision, you might say something like, "Honey, I hear what you're saying, and I think I just need a day to think about it on my own. I'm an internal processor and I need to have my own conversation in my head about this before I figure this out with you." This understanding helps you to accept and be patient while you and your partner process in your own ways. Now, your conversation and processing style shows up in other areas too, not just in big decisions. Last year, my trusty minivan, the one that I had spent years and years hanging out with my kids in, decided to die on me. And it wasn't worth the cost to fix it, so I was forced to go get a new car. Now, I had planned on that van lasting me at least another year. And I really appreciated that old van and all the memories I had with my kids in it. I even did some thought work on loving the van and understanding that, you know what, this van is mine for at least another year. I'm going to imagine all the beautiful moments that I had in it. And I did thought work on loving this minivan. So I, not only did I have all the memories, I had all the thought work that I had done around accepting that this was my minivan for a while. But I was forced into the decision to rush to buy a new car. And with all the incredible rebates last year during COVID, I actually ended up getting a really good deal on a brand new car. It's a great car. It's one that fits my needs really well, and it's very comfortable. My back does not hurt at all when I drive in it. And a bonus was that I feel very safe about teaching my third child how to drive in it. So it's a great car, right? My new car was great, but I had to process this change very slowly and internally. It took me a few days of driving this new car and processing the fact that my minivan, the car that I drove my kids around in for much of their lives, the car that so many conversations with my kids in happened and trips that we took, was no longer part of our lives. You know, my kids talk much easier to me when I'm driving them. So many times, if they're having a hard time and want to connect, they'll say, "Hey, Mom, can we go for a drive?" So we'll go for a drive and we'll listen to music and we'll talk. And we've even taken that van camping and to concerts together. So that van felt like a very big part of my life. Even though I wanted a new car, I was still very sentimental about my van. And I needed to process that on my own before I could thoroughly enjoy my brand new car. So I processed it. I took some time to process it. And now I'm ecstatic about my brand new car. But I wasn't immediately. I had to process it. And while I was quietly processing the sentimental aspect of losing that old car, Chris noticed that I was quiet about it and asked, "Rach, do you even like your new car?" And I was like, "Yes, I like it. And I'll be excited about it. Just give me a minute to process what just happened." Now, he could have taken offense at this. He could have thought, "Sheesh, nothing will make her happy, not even a brand new car." But after 24 years, we're starting to understand each other and starting to understand how to hold space for each other in these moments. I told him a few days later about all the processing that I had to do mentally to let go of my old van to accept my new car. And he was like, "Wow, I had no idea that you had so many feelings about the minivan." And of course he didn't. I'm an internal processor, and I need to process it on my own before I share it with him. It's just who I am. But for now, for this week, I want you to become aware of what kind of processor you and your partner are. Open up a conversation about this with your partner this week. If you are an internal processor, maybe go journal all your thoughts about it, all your thoughts about this episode and what you're learning first, and what understanding this could mean for your relationship. Sometimes journaling your thoughts about something helps you to gather all your thoughts so that you can have a really good conversation with your partner. And honestly, that goes for internal or external processors. Journaling isn't just for one type of people. It's for everyone. Journaling is magic. It gives you time to dig deep and understand yourself more. And then, when you are ready, go ask your partner what they think. Ask them how they process things. Is it verbally or internally? You may have an assumption there and they may assume something different. That's kind of interesting when you see your partner differently than what they see themselves as. And so talking about this can really help you to understand each other on a deeper level. So try having a discussion and understanding each other a little bit more before the next big decision that you need to make together. Okay, thank you for listening to that episode. For some of you the second time, some of you the first time. And I wanted to make a suggestion to you that if you are getting a lot out of this podcast, I encourage you to go to Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to this podcast and just leave me a review. What those reviews do is it encourages other people to come and listen to it as well. It lets them know what they're going to get. You know, I just saw the most recent review on my podcast, and I'm just going to read it to you to just show you kind of what other people can see so that they know, oh, maybe I should listen to that as well. So this one says, worth it every time. She says, this show always leaves me in better spirits with really good and important questions to mull over. Rachel is so relatable and brings such wise insights to each topic. Bite-sized enough that I feel I can really implement some of the advice every week and not feel overwhelmed, but just inspired enough. This show is really soothing and affirming while challenging inner growth. It's one of the only podcasts that I can say really improves my mental health and my relationship. And that, you guys, is exactly what I want for you. This is not just about relationships, right? This is why I call it holistic marriage help. It's because I look at the whole life. I look at our whole mind, body, and spirit and see how you are relating with yourself before you show up and relate with your partner. So thank you for that review. Her name is, she calls herself Beats Surround Us, which I love. So thank you for that review, Beats Surround Us. And if you want to leave a review, just know that it helps so many other people. It helps it helps spread the word of the podcast. And also, if you are not on my newsletter, I encourage you to get on there right now. You can go to rachelcunningham.com and you can sign up for the free course to Better Connection. That will give you a free 10-minute course to Better Connection, and it'll also put you on my subscriber list. You want to be on my subscriber list right now because in the next month, I'm going to start letting you know some new ways that you can work with me, and you're not going to want to miss that. There are some new opportunities that I cannot wait to share with you in the next few weeks. So go to rachelcunningham.com, get on the subscriber list, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening to Joyful Love. If you'd like to know more about my work, come visit me at rachelcunningham.com. That's Rachel, spelled with an A-E-L, Cunningham.com.